The elevator to the 38th floor had a specific sound when it reached the top. A soft pneumatic exhale, like the building itself was letting out a breath. I'd heard it every morning for 19 months, always at 7:02 a.m., always before anyone else arrived. Always in the particular quiet that existed between the night cleaning crew and the first wave of associates who wouldn't show until 8. I set my bag on my desk, pulled up the overnight emails, and started the coffee. Not for myself. I'd already had mine on the train, a medium dark roast from the cart outside Penn Station that cost $4 and tasted like it. This was for him. Single origin Ethiopian, brewed in the specific French press his sister had sent from Portland 2 Christmases ago. Pressed at exactly 4 minutes, poured into a plain white ceramic mug that had somehow survived every office renovation and holiday clear out because nobody dared throw it away. His name was Rowan Hale. Not Mr. Hale. That's what the associates called him, what the junior partners said when they were nervous, which was often. To me, he was simply Hale, the way you might refer to a force of nature by a proper noun. The storm. The tide. Hale. He ran Hale Capital like it was an extension of his nervous system. Private equity. Mid-market acquisitions. The kind of deals that didn't make headlines because the people involved preferred it that way. I was his executive assistant, which meant I was the membrane between Hale and the rest of the world, filtering what got through, when, and in what form. It was a job that required exactly the kind of person I was. Organized to the point of mild obsession, perceptive enough to read a room before entering it, and constitutionally incapable of being intimidated. That last part had taken him longest to accept. The morning the package arrived, I was cross-referencing 2 sets of quarterly projections, and eating a granola bar I'd forgotten I'd put in my desk drawer sometime in October. The receptionist, a cheerful recent grad named Penny, who still believed in office small talk, appeared at my desk holding a flat white box tied with a ribbon, the color of dried blood. "This came for you," she said, with the particular brightness of someone who'd decided the package was interesting. "From a florist. Well, not flowers exactly, more like an arrangement." She set it on the corner of my desk and hovered. I looked at it, no return address, my name in clean, unhurried handwriting. The ribbon was silk, not the synthetic kind. Someone had spent actual money on the packaging before I'd even opened it. Did the courier leave a name? Just a company. Alderton & Co. I looked them up. They're like a very high-end gifting service, the kind where you need a referral to even place an order. I cut the ribbon with my letter opener. Inside, nested in tissue paper, was a single branch of cherry blossoms. Real ones, not dried, which meant they'd been sourced and shipped at considerable expense for something that would last maybe 5 days. Beneath it a card. For the woman who makes every Monday survivable. A. No last name. No context. Just the initial. I stared at it for a moment, then put it back in the box. "Thanks, Penny," she lingered. "Do you know who it's from?" "Not yet." She left, slightly disappointed. I went back to the quarterly projections. I didn't think about it again until Hale came in at 7:48, 8 minutes earlier than usual, which meant something had either gone wrong overnight, or he'd woken up with an idea he needed to execute before it could be second-guessed. He stopped at my desk. His charcoal coat was still on, his dark hair showing the ghost of where he'd run his hands through it in the car. He had the particular energy of someone who'd been awake since 4:30 solving a problem the rest of us didn't know existed. He looked at the box. "What is that?" Not a question, more like an identification request. "A delivery. It came this morning. For you." "Yes." He picked up the card before I could stop him. Not that I would have, but the motion was so automatic it surprised me. He read it. His expression didn't change, but something around his jaw did. A slight compression, like a door closing quietly. He set the card down. "Do you know who sent it?" "The initial is A. Beyond that, no." He straightened. "Run your usual morning briefing. I have a call at 8:15. He walked into his office without looking back. I ran the briefing. I sat across from him while he drank his coffee, and we moved through the day's agenda with the efficiency we'd developed over 19 months. Me 2 steps ahead of each item. Him never needing to ask where we were in the sequence. It was, as I'd told my friend Dara once, like conducting an orchestra where the conductor already knew every note, and you were just there to make sure the music stands didn't fall over. It was a good job. I liked it. I liked him. in the complicated way you come to like someone you've seen make genuinely hard decisions with both intelligence and integrity. He wasn't easy. He was demanding and exacting, and occasionally had the social warmth of a federal audit. But I'd watched him handle a situation where a portfolio company's CFO had been quietly embezzling from the pension fund. Handle it in a way that protected the employees first, the investors second, and his own reputation last. That told me what I needed to know. The package sat on my desk all day. I didn't open it again. Around 4, his head of security, a quiet, methodical man named Ellis, who I'd always suspected saw more than he said, appeared next to my desk. "Mr. Hale asked me to check on the delivery you received this morning. Standard protocol when packages arrive without a known sender. He asked you to do that." He did. I thought about pushing back, decided it wasn't worth the energy. The gifting service was called Alderton & Co. Penny found them earlier. Apparently they require a referral. Ellis nodded, made a note, didn't explain anything further. By the time I was packing up to leave, Hale appeared in the doorway of his office. Unusual. He normally communicated departure-adjacent things through the intercom. "The Blossoms," he said. "Did you want them moved to your car?" Something in his tone was doing a specific kind of work, very controlled, very flat, which in his case usually meant the opposite of flat. I'd learned to read the negative space in how he spoke. "They're fine on my desk. They'll be dead before the weekend." Everything's dead before the weekend eventually. A muscle moved in his jaw. "Do you know anyone whose name starts with A?" I could have listed half a dozen people. Instead, I said, "Is that a professional concern? You're my executive assistant. Your safety in this building is my concern. It's a branch of Cherry Blossoms, not a credible threat. I'll have Ellis look into the sender." He went back into his office before I could tell him not to. I took the Cherry Blossoms home. They sat on my kitchen windowsill in a water glass, slightly absurd against the backdrop of my second-hand IKEA shelves and the stack of unread library books I kept meaning to get to. My apartment was in Astoria, Queens, not the Oregon one, on the 4th floor of a building where the super fixed things promptly and the neighbors minded their own business, which was exactly what I needed. My phone buzzed at 9:15. Unknown number. "I hope the Blossoms arrived safely. I wasn't sure if you'd prefer something more traditional, but you don't strike me as traditional." I stared at it. The phrasing was careful, confident, unhurried. Someone who was used to choosing their words. I didn't respond. 20 minutes later, another message. "I've been thinking about introducing myself properly. Dinner Friday, if you're open to it. Somewhere quiet, I'll handle the details." There was no sense of urgency in it. No performance of spontaneity. This was planned. The Blossoms, the card, the text. It was a sequence, not an impulse. I called Dara. "Someone sent you Cherry Blossoms through an elite gifting service, and then texted you from an unknown number, asking you to dinner," she said when I'd finished explaining. "Okay, that's either very romantic or very concerning. Both, I think. Have you told your terrifyingly intense boss?" "He already has his security person looking into the sender." Dara was quiet for a second. "He does. Why does he care?" "He said it's a professional concern." "Right." She didn't sound convinced. "You know, some people would find it romantic that their boss." "Good night, Dara." I slept badly. Not from fear, exactly. From the particular alertness of someone who's been made aware that they've been observed without knowing it. The next morning, Hale was already in his office when I arrived, which meant he'd been there since at least 6. He came out before I'd even set down my bag. "Close the door," he said. His voice was level, but so is the surface of deep water. I did. He moved to his desk and opened a folder. Inside were printed documents, recent from the timestamp in the corner. "The sender is Adrian Mercer." The name meant nothing to me. I said so. "His family runs a consulting firm, Mercer Strategic Group, based in Midtown. Legitimate on the surface. Primarily financial advisory, some political consulting." Hale's expression was careful in the way it got, when he was giving me information and watching for my reaction simultaneously. 3 years ago, his firm was brought in to advise on a deal we were structuring with a regional logistics company. The deal fell apart. "Because of you?" He looked at me. "Yes." I waited. The logistics company had a contract with a defense subcontractor whose supply chain we couldn't verify. When I dug into it, I found documentation suggesting certain materials were being routed through shell companies, in jurisdictions that raise significant concerns. I pulled out of the deal. Mercer's firm lost a very large advisory fee. His father has spent the last 3 years telling anyone who'd listen that I acted in bad faith. And now his son is sending me flowers. Hale's jaw tightened. Adrian Mercer has visited the coffee shop on Lex you go to on Tuesday mornings. He was at the same networking event you attended in October. He was at the fundraiser gala in March, where you volunteered for the museum. The floor felt slightly less solid. How do you know all of that? Because I noticed him at the gala, Hale said, with a kind of measured evenness that told me how much he was containing. He asked about you. Too many questions, phrased too carefully, about someone he had no obvious reason to know. You've been watching him. I've been keeping track of someone who was paying unusual attention to a person in my organization. There's a difference, is there? His gray eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw something underneath the composure, something I didn't have language for yet, or maybe chose not to name. Adrian Mercer doesn't do things without a purpose, he said. His firm specializes in leverage. That's what they sell. Information strategically deployed at the right moment. His interest in you didn't start because you're someone he met at a coffee shop. I understood it then, slowly but fully. He thinks I have access to your deal flow, your contacts, your decision-making process. You do have access to those things, that's why you're valuable to him. A pause. And why he thinks you might be amenable, undervalued. Working in someone else's shadow. The characterization stung not because it was cruel, but because it was exactly what someone would say to make it sting. I'm going to respond to his dinner invitation, I said. Hale went still. I'm going to meet him, somewhere public, and I'm going to let him make his case. I held his gaze. Because that's how we find out exactly what he's after. No, it's the smart move. It's not your call, with respect. And I watched something shift in his expression at that phrase, something like recognition. You don't get to make that decision for me. If I'm the one he's trying to use, then I'm the one best positioned to handle it. A long silence. You'd be going in without knowing the full scope of what he wants. Then tell me the full scope. He did. He told me everything. The deal that had collapsed, the materials he'd refused to be associated with, the quiet pressure campaign Mercer Strategic had run against him in the years since. By the time he finished, I understood why he'd kept security protocols I'd always found excessive. They weren't paranoia. They were pattern recognition. I'll agree to this on one condition, he said finally. I waited. You wear a wire. Ellis will be outside, and if at any point something feels wrong, I signal immediately. I'd already anticipated this. I know. He studied me the way he studied a term sheet, looking for the thing that wasn't there, the risk buried in language that sounded straightforward. You're going to be careful, he said. Not a question. I'm always careful. You know that. Something in his expression moved. I know. The restaurant Adrian Mercer chose for our first meeting was a French bistro on the Upper West Side. Good wine list, corner tables with enough ambient noise to make recording difficult, which told me he'd thought about recording. He was already seated when I arrived. Mid-30s, well-dressed in the way of someone who'd been taught young that appearance was a tool. He stood when he saw me, smiled with practiced warmth. Quinn. My name in his mouth sounded like something he'd been rehearsing. Thank you for coming. I took my seat, accepted the menu. The blossoms were beautiful. Unusual choice. I thought roses were too expected for someone like you, and what am I like? He tilted his head slightly. Precise, observant. Someone who notices when the usual gestures are performances. He was good. He was leading with the flattery of being seen. The most effective kind, because it's hard to distrust someone who seems to understand you. You know where I work, I said. I do. Then you know I'm not looking to change jobs. I'm not here to recruit you. He set his menu down. I'm here because I've been following the work you do. The way you organize a room before anyone's arrived. The way you anticipate problems without being asked to. I've been at 3 events where you were present. I watched you handle a catering disaster at the March Gala that most people never even knew happened. You were watching me pretty closely, for someone who hadn't introduced himself. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. I wanted to understand who you were before approaching you. Impulsive decisions are expensive. We ordered. The conversation moved through normal dinner territory, where I was from originally. Ohio, outside Columbus. How I'd ended up in New York, the usual story. Internship that became a job, what I did outside work. He was skilled at making professional curiosity sound like personal interest. Then around the time the entree arrived. What's it like working for Rowan Hale? There it was. Demanding, I said. He has high standards and he expects people around him to have them too. But you've stayed 19 months. Because the work is interesting, or because he's skilled at making people feel indispensable. Adrian's voice stayed pleasant, but the content had shifted. There are people in this industry who know how to calibrate just enough appreciation to create loyalty without ever offering equity. Hale's particularly good at it. That sounds like a theory about someone you don't know well. My family has done business with him, or tried to. His expression was neutral, but something underneath it wasn't. I know how he operates when a deal goes sideways. I know the decisions he makes and who absorbs the cost. Are you asking me about his business practices? I'm telling you that there are things about the man you work for that you should probably know. Things that might change how you understand your situation. I put my fork down. Let a beat of silence sit between us. That's a very careful way to propose something specific, I said. What is it exactly that you want? He looked at me, something recalibrated behind his eyes. He'd expected more deflection or more amenability, not directness. Information, he said, about deal flow, about the contacts he uses for due diligence in international markets. Nothing that wouldn't be considered standard background research by anyone who wanted to do business with Hale Capital. Except you'd be paying for it through a social arrangement with me, which is not how standard background research works. He smiled slowly. You're faster than I expected. What were you expecting? Someone more, uncertain. You've been in an assistant role for nearly 2 years. I thought you might be looking for an exit. I'm not a disgruntled employee, Adrian. No, he said, studying me now with something that was no longer entirely performance. You're not, which makes you more interesting, honestly, not less. I picked up my fork. I need time to think about this. He nodded, leaning back. Of course, this isn't a pressure conversation. I just want you to consider that there are people who would value what you know in ways that might reframe your sense of what your work is worth. The rest of dinner passed in surface conversation. By the time I was in a cab heading home, I'd catalogued every specific thing he'd asked, every phrase he'd used, every name he'd implied without saying directly. Ellis's SUV had been 2 cars back the whole time. I'd spotted it on the way out. My phone rang before I reached the bridge. Hale. Tell me everything. No preamble. I did. Every word I could reconstruct, every implication I'd caught, every moment his tone had shifted. Hale listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a silence of the kind that meant he was thinking through several possibilities at once. He's after the contact network, he said, not just deal flow. The people I work with in due diligence who have access to things that don't go through official channels. That's what I read, too. You did well. A pause. Are you home? Almost. Lock your door, Rowan. His name came out before I'd decided to use it. I heard the slight shift in his breathing. I'm fine. I know you're fine. Lock your door anyway. 3 days later, his name showed up in my email. A package request from Alderton & Co., a follow-up to confirm my thoughts on the dinner. No overt pressure, just presence. A gentle reminder that he was still there, still interested, still patient. I forwarded it to Hale immediately. He called within 2 minutes. Come to my office. We need to talk. His apartment. Not the office. He'd said office and I'd followed him to the elevator, and somehow we'd ended up on a higher floor, in a space that was clearly where he actually lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched below like a circuit board at night. Bookshelves. A chess set mid-game on the side table. A framed photograph of a woman who shared his bone structure. Your mother? I asked. He turned from the window where he'd been looking out at the city. Grandmother. She raised me from 12. I waited. My parents were in a car accident, he said. She was 71 and living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport, and she took me in without hesitation and worked 2 jobs so I could go to a decent school. He looked at the photograph. She asked me once what I wanted to build. Not for the money. For the legacy. What did I want people to say about it when I was gone? What did you tell her? That I wanted to build something that didn't require me to look away from anything. He moved toward the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water, handed me one. The Mercer deal. When I found the documentation about the supply chain, I could have walked away quietly, signed the NDA, taken my loss, let it continue. A lot of people in my position would have. It was cleaner, but you didn't. I couldn't look away from it. I thought about that. Thought about 19 months of watching him make decisions, and how this was the context for all of it. He's going to reach out again, I said. Adrian. Probably with something more concrete. An actual number, yes. Hale set his glass down. His hands were braced on the counter, and when he looked at me, there was something in his expression I'd seen before. The night he'd found out about the package, and in the lobby of our building the day I'd pushed back on something he'd decided without asking me, something he kept reaching for and then pulling back from. What? I said. I've been trying to figure out how to say something, he said, and I keep deciding it's not the right time, or it's not appropriate, or… He stopped. A breath. You came to work for me, and inside 3 weeks you'd reorganize the entire document filing system and explain to me, very politely, exactly why my previous organizational structure was going to cause me a problem I hadn't anticipated yet. And you were right. You were right, and you were also new, and most people… He paused. Most people don't do that. They wait to see what they're allowed to say. I don't really operate that way. No, you don't. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. You drink your coffee black and slightly too hot. You keep a spare pair of shoes in the bottom left drawer of your desk for when you have to pivot to a different kind of meeting with no warning. You say, with respect, right before you're about to ignore what I just asked for, and then you explain to me why your version is better, and 9 times out of 10 you're correct. My heart was doing something unhelpful. You know everything about how I operate in a professional context, I said carefully. I know, he said. That's the problem. Because somewhere in the last 19 months, your professional context became the part of my day He stopped again. His jaw was tight. You became the person I trust most. And I don't say that lightly because I don't trust easily. And now you're in Adrian Mercer's crosshairs because of me, and I am having a very difficult time being rational about that. Silence. I'm going to meet him again, I said. And this time I'm going to let him make the offer explicitly. All of it, on the record. Quinn? Not because you're asking me to. Because it's the right move, and because I understand what's at stake, and because… I held his gaze. Because I actually care what happens to this. To what you've built. Which might sound strange coming from an assistant, but it's true. He looked at me for a long moment. Something in his expression cracked open. Just slightly, just at the edges. The way a window gives a fraction of an inch and changes all the air in the room. It doesn't sound strange, he said quietly. It sounds exactly like you. We planned it over the next week. Ellis coached me on the technical setup. A device that looked like a simple hair clip and had pickup range that impressed me. Hale ran through every scenario he could construct, every angle Adrian might approach from, every possible way the conversation could pivot. The night before the second meeting, I found Hale in the conference room at 11:30. The room dark except for the city lights coming through the glass, the table covered in documents he'd clearly been reviewing for hours. You should sleep, I said from the doorway. I'm fine. I came in, sat across from him. What's actually keeping you up? A long pause. The last time I let someone into my world, he said, was my business partner in the early years. Before Hale Capital was what it is now, he was my roommate in grad school, my closest friend. And when things got difficult, when a deal went badly and we needed to make hard calls, he made a different one than I did, a worse one that cost people their savings. His hands were flat on the table. I cut him out, completely, and I've run this company alone since then because it was simpler and safer, and I didn't want to put that weight on anyone else. You have a full team, I said. An organization, not the same thing. He looked at me. You're not an organization. I understood what he was saying, and I chose my words deliberately. I'm not going anywhere, Rowan. The quiet that followed was the kind that changes something. I know, he said finally. That's what I keep coming back to. The second meeting with Adrian was at a hotel bar in Midtown, his choice again. He arrived confident, already ordering when I got there, the ease of someone who believed the conversation was going his way. You've been thinking, he said. I have, and… I want to understand the scope of what you're asking. I held his gaze. Specifically, he smiled, leaned forward, and then he told me, precisely, in the careful language of someone who'd done this before, the exact nature of what he wanted, the due diligence contacts, the routing information for international transfers, the names of the intermediaries Hale used in deals that didn't go through the main firm. For that, he said, I'd make it worth your while. Significantly. How significantly? He named a number. I nodded slowly, like I was considering it. There's something else, he said, and his voice shifted. Still smooth, but with something harder underneath. It would be useful for you to understand who you're protecting before you make this decision. Rowan Hale isn't who he presents himself to be. The deal my family lost. He didn't pull out for ethical reasons. He pulled out because he had a competing offer, and he used our deal's information to position himself better. I looked at him. Do you have documentation of that? He reached into his jacket, pulled out an envelope. Everything you need to draw your own conclusions. I took it. I said I'd be in touch. In the cab home, with Ellis 3 cars behind me, I opened the envelope and read every page. Then I called Hale. He made the offer explicit, I said, and he gave me something else. Documents, designed to make you look like the one who acted in bad faith 3 years ago. A silence. Is it fabricated? Some of it's real data arranged to tell a specific story. The timestamps are off on 2 of the key pieces by about 6 hours. Another silence. Longer this time. Then, how did you catch that? I schedule everything you do. I know when you're in meetings and when you're not. 2 of those alleged communications were sent during a board session I arranged and have the minutes for. I paused. He didn't account for your assistant having a perfect record of your calendar. What came through the phone was not quite a laugh, but close. The next 48 hours moved quickly. The documents went to a white-collar attorney, who'd worked with Hale before, and then to a compliance consultant, who specialized in exactly the kind of financial maneuvering Mercer Strategic had been engaged in. What they found when they dug into Adrian's current client roster made the original deal look minor. A pattern of exactly the kind of information brokering that looked like consulting until you followed the money. Hale made 2 phone calls I wasn't party to. 3 days later, 2 federal investigators showed up at Mercer Strategic's offices. When it was over, when Adrian had been informed that his firm was under investigation, and that any further contact with me would be considered obstruction, Hale came to find me at my desk. The building had emptied out. The overhead lights were off, and the city coming through the windows was doing all the illuminating. It's done, he said. I know. Ellis texted me. He almost smiled. Of course he did. He sat in the chair across from my desk, the one the junior partners used when they needed to explain something. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and looked at me. I need to say something, he said. Okay, I told you weeks ago that you'd become the person I trust most. And I meant it as a professional statement, and it was also not entirely a professional statement, and I've been. He stopped. Tried again. I've been in this industry for 15 years. I've run this firm alone by choice. And the reason I've been able to justify that is that I never found a situation where the alternative seemed worth the complication. I waited. You are worth the complication, he said. Quietly. Completely. The way Hale said things when he'd decided to say them. Every version of it. I thought about 19 months. About the coffee I made every morning, and the calendar I kept, and the 100 small ways I'd learned to navigate the specific gravity of him. About the moment in the lobby when he'd looked at me over a box of cherry blossoms, and something had flickered in his expression that I'd filed away and not examined. I know, I said. He looked up. I've known for a while, I said. I was waiting for you to catch up. The corner of his mouth moved. Something in his whole face released. Tension I hadn't realized was permanent until it wasn't. You could have said something. With respect, I said. You needed to say it. He laughed, a real one, short and low. Then he stood, crossed to my side of the desk, and stood close enough that I had to tilt my head to meet his eyes. Quinn, he said. Just my name. The way he'd never said it before. Yes, I said. He kissed me. Careful at first, then not careful at all. Like something that had been held at a precise controlled temperature, finally allowed to exist at its actual degree. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breathing as unsteady as I'd ever heard it. This is going to be complicated, he said. I know, there will be other people who try to use you to get to me, other situations, the work I do. It doesn't get simpler. I understand that. I stayed exactly where I was. I'm not looking for simple. You could be anywhere, any firm, any role. He paused like he was choosing the word carefully, the way he did everything. Exceptional, I know that too. Another almost law, the confidence I learned from you. He pulled back enough to look at me properly. I have conditions. So do I. I met his gaze. I'm going to start consulting independently. I'll transition out of the assistant role. I need my own work, my own clients. I can't be defined by proximity to you, agreed. We make decisions together. The big ones. No more unilateral calls where you decide what I can handle, agreed. His eyes were steady intent. My condition is that when threats arise, and they will, you come to me immediately, not after. Not when you've already handled it, immediately, agreed. I paused. One more thing. Yes, when this settles, when it's actually settled. I want the real version of whatever this is. Not something kept quiet for optics, the actual thing. He held my gaze for a long moment. The actual thing, he said. Yes. The months that followed were not uncomplicated. Adrian's case took time to move through the system. Federal investigations rarely sprint. His father, in the interim, made noise through intermediaries the way powerful men do when they're losing. Ellis managed 2 situations I was briefed on after the fact, which violated our agreement and resulted in a genuinely tense conversation that Hale and I had in his kitchen at midnight, and which ended with him acknowledging I'd been right, and me acknowledging I understood why he'd done it, and neither of us pretending the tension wasn't also something else, something that had nothing to do with security protocols. I built my own consultancy from the ground up, operational efficiency, organizational design, the kind of work I'd been doing informally for years. My first 3 clients came through Hale's network, but my 4th and 5th I found myself, and the 5th was a company that specifically wanted someone who wasn't connected to him, and I took it, and it was the best professional decision I made that year. We were careful in public for a while, then less careful, then not at all, because it turned out the people who mattered already knew. And the people it might have affected professionally adapted when they understood that the arrangement had made both of us better at our work, not worse. Hale's grandmother had a saying. He told me this on a night when we were late in his apartment. The chessboard between us, the city going dark outside. The people who are right for each other make each other harder to fool. I thought about that for a long time afterward. Adrian Mercer's firm was dissolved 14 months after the investigation began. His father retired to Florida. The contacts they'd been trying to extract from us were never compromised. What they'd been trying to prevent. Hale's firm continuing to operate with a specific set of principles intact. Continued. On the first morning, I didn't have to make anyone else's coffee. I stood in my own kitchen in the apartment I'd moved into, after finally leaving Astoria for something with a little more light, and poured a cup for myself. Medium roast, not single-origin Ethiopian. My phone buzzed. Good morning. For the record, you made better coffee than I've managed in 6 months. I looked at the message for a moment, smiled before I could decide to. You could come learn, I wrote back. Or you could ask your new assistant. His response came in under 10 seconds. I'll come learn. There are moments when you understand, without being able to fully explain why, that the particular sequence of events you've lived through was not incidental. The cherry blossoms that showed up at a desk on the 38th floor. The card with a single initial. Every careful, calculated step of a man who thought he could use me as a path to someone else, not understanding that I wasn't a path, I was a wall. And behind the wall, a man who'd been building something harder than most people knew, and softer than he'd ever let anyone's see. I'd seen it. From the very first morning, in the quiet before the elevator exhaled and the day started, in the specific weight of his trust, and the particular way he said my name when there was no professional reason to say it at all. Some things take exactly as long as they need to.